This Tekla plugin automates connections between secondary members, girts, and primary members, columns, in pre-engineered buildings. It supports flush, inset, and bypass connections, streamlining repetitive tasks to boost modeling speed, accuracy, and ease of use. Hello everyone. Today, I am here to present to you the Stridely Girt connection. First, let's look at the UI and understand its properties. In the UI, you can see there are 4 tabs: parameters, volts, flange racing, and welds. In the parameters tab, the user can manipulate and choose the thickness of the plate, the width, the length, as well as the material of the plate from the drop-down here. From the drop-down of the connection plate type, the user can manipulate or choose the type of supporting plate for the girt, which is required. For example, if a welded plate is required, it is by default. The user can choose from a welded L-shaped plate as well as a bolted L-shaped plate. In the bolts tab, the user can select the standard of the bolt, the size of the bolt, depending on the standard, as well as the user can choose an offset of the bolt array. You can see there are various standards in the drop-down list, and the size of the bolt depends upon the standard. The user can also select whether an additional bolt washer or a nut is required. Over here, the user can choose the number of horizontal bolts required, as well as the distance between them and the requirement of the vertical bolts, as well as the distance between them. In the flange bracing tab, a user can select whether the girts should overlap each other in the bypass condition or not. By default, there is no overlap of the goods, which is a simplest pan scenario. Apart from that, the girts can overlap for 1 feet over each other, as shown in the figure. If the user wishes to increase or decrease the distance of the overlapping of the girts, then that can be set from the third option. In this drop-down, that is the user-defined overlapping, and the user can set the distance of the overlap in this tab. The user can also select the profile of the flange brace provided over here. By default, both the flange braces are provided, but according to the requirement of the user, the selection of the flange brace can be done by using the checkboxes provided, as well as the distance between the flange brace to the center of the column can be manipulated by entering a specified distance over here. In the welds tab, the user can set the size of the weld above, as well as below, and choose from options whether the weld is required at edge or around, as well as whether the weld should be done on the workshop or on-site. Now let's get to implementing Theplogin in the model.as. You can see there are various scenarios here. So we will be covering the flush Girt connection, the inset Girt connection, the bypass Girt connection, as well as the corner column. First, let's start with a simple flush Girt connection. For that, and for easy understanding, I will choose to open the UI of the Girt Connection Plugin for better understanding. Now, as you can see, when I select the Stridely Girt Connection component, it instructs us to pick a column. After picking the column, it instructs us to pick a girts that we can pick multiple girts, that is 1 or 2, but for a simple span, let's start with a single girts. After picking the girts, we are required to press the middle button on the mouse to complete the connection, and just like that, you can see the connection is placed. On selecting the connection, we can manipulate the plate properties as well as the bolts and the weld. Over here, I can select the distance of the plate. Let's say if the plate required is 1 inch, the width required is 5 inches, and the length required is 12 inches, that is 1 feet. After clicking Modify, you can see that the plate is modified according to the input that I just given right now, but sometimes this is not feasible. That's why let's change it back to its default values. Now, as you can see here in this option, we can change the profile of the plate from a welded plate profile to an L-shaped plate or a clip. Upon selecting the welded L-shaped plate and clicking Modify, you can see that the plate is modified in an L-shape for better stability, and it is welded to the column. Upon selecting the bolted of the welded L-shaped plate and clicking Modify, you can see that the bolts are added to the column. This gives better stability. The user can manipulate the material of the plate through selection of the material from this drop-down. Now, coming to the bolts, you can see that there is an extra nut provided, as well as a washer, which can be removed if not required, by unchecking this checkboxes. Just like that, as you can see, the extra bolt and the extra bolt nut and the bolt washer is removed. Also change the standard of the bolt and the size of the bolt by selection from this drop-down. For example, if the bolt required is by default, it is a 307 and the user wishes to have some other standard, then he can or she can. Select it from here and choose the size of the bolt, for example 1 inch.as. You can see the bolts are modified according to the requirement. Now let's change it back to default so we can explore the horizontal bolts as well as the vertical bolts. For example, if the user wishes to have 3 number of horizontal bolts at a distance of 2 inches and 2 number of vertical bolts at a distance of 3 inches, and upon clicking modifying you can see that the bolts are replaced. There are 3 bolts at a distance of 2 inches and 2 rows of 3 bolts at a distance of 3 inches. In the flush or inset condition, there is no functionality of the flannel region, so let's choose to explore the weld tabs for better understanding of the weld. I will choose to select the welded plate as it gives better visuals. See if the weld above required is of 1 inch and the weld below required is of 2 inches. Upon clicking modifying, you can see that the size of the weld is changed in real time, but sometimes this is not feasible. So to see the welded edge and around, we will choose to have the weld at the default size, that is 1/2 inches, and select the weld around. Upon clicking modifying, you can see that there is now a weld around the plate. Similarly, the user can choose whether the weld should be done at site or in the workshop through choice given from this drop-down. Now let's come back to the condition of the bypass. For that, there are 2 girts provided. As you can see, after the instructions, I pick a column, and then I pick girt number 1, then I pick girt number 2. Upon clicking the mouse button, the connection is placed very effortlessly along with both the flannel basin. Now if you can see, I choose to manipulate the type of the girt supporting plate by choosing from the options provided. Here, if I wish to have the length of the plate at a different size, then I can choose to give a desired input here. For example, let's say I want the length of the plate at 12 inches, that is 1 feet. Upon clicking modifying, you can see that the length of the plate has increased. Now let's come to the bolts. If I wish to have a smaller bolt size, I will simply choose a smaller bolt size from here. As you can see, the extra bolt washer and the nut is removed. Similarly, if the user wishes to have 2 number of bolts at a distance of 4 inches and 4 number of vertical bolts at a distance of 2 inches, it can be manipulated accordingly, but sometimes this is not feasible. For this, we will change the length of the plate back to, let's say, 16 inches. Upon clicking modifying, as you can see that the extra bolts provide extra stability. Connection, as it is a bypass one, we can choose to manipulate the flange facing as well. You can see that the bolts do not overlap each other. If the user wishes to have an overlap of the bolts by 1 feet, it can be done by selecting the second option from this breakdown. Upon clicking modifying, you can see that the bolts have now overlap each other at a distance of 1 feet. If the user wishes to change or manipulate the distance of the overlapping, it can easily be done by inputting the desired value of the overlapping here. Let's say the overlapping distance should be done at 2 feet, that is 24 inches. So as you can see that the overlapping distance has been changed. Now let's change it back to the default, that is no overlap. The profile of the flange facing can be manipulated by selecting the sizes and the profile given in this drop-down. For example, if the user wishes to change the profile of the flange brace to L5 by 5 by 5 by 8 simply selecting that option, and it's letting modifying will change the profile of the flange brace. But clearly this is not a feasible solution, so changing it back to normal. The user can also select which flange brace to provide. Flange brace 1, that is the one on the right, or flange brace 2, that is the one on the left. If I uncheck this checkbox and click Modify, there will be only one flange brace provided, that is flange brace 2 on the left. The distance of the flange brace to the center of the column can be manipulated by entering a desired value here. I want it 1 feet. It can be changed easily. If I want it more than 1 feet, let's say 3 feet, it can be done so easily. Similarly for the first flange brace as well. If the user is required to have it at 1.5 feet upon clicking Modifying, you can see that the flange brace 1 is provided, but at a distance of 1.5 inches. Let's change it to keeping inches, that is 1.5 feet. It is manipulated accordingly. Now, let's try to understand the corner column connection, that is the bypass at corner. Now over here, I select the column, I select the girt. After clicking the middle button, the girt connection is placed where the fitting is done as per the size of the column, and both flange racing are provided. But since this is not a desired solution or an appropriate one, let's uncheck the first flange brace, and as you can see, the properties that we gave prior are still provided, so let's change it back to the normal. If the user wishes to not have the bolt nuts, simply by unchecking the checkbox, it can be removed, as well as if the bolted L-shaped plate is not required, but a welded plate is required, that can be done so easily. Over here, as you can see, the size of the distance between the flange brace to the center of the column can be easily manipulated by giving an input of the desired value over here. Let's say the distance required is 4 feet, and over here, the distance is manipulated. This is the girt connection,